Hi, folks, and welcome to First Bite, Fed, Fun, and Functional, a speech therapy podcast sponsored by SpeechTherapyPD.com. I am your host on this nerd venture, Michelle Dawson, MS, CCC, SLP, CLC, the All Things Peds SLP. I am a colleague in the trenches of home health early intervention right there with you. I run my own private practice, Heartwood Speech Therapy, here in Culvertown, South Carolina, and I guest lecture nationwide on best practices for early intervention for the medically complex and fragile child. First Bite's mission is short and sweet, to bring light, hope, knowledge, and joy to the pediatric clinician, parent, or advocate.
By way of a nerdy conversation, so there's plenty of laughter too.
In this podcast, we cover everything from AAC to breastfeeding,
ethics on how to run a private practice,
pediatric dysphagia to clinical supervision,
and all other topics in the world of pediatric speech pathology. Our goal is to bring evidence-based practice straight to you by interviewing subject matter experts,
to break down the communication barriers so that we can access the knowledge of their fields.
Or, as a close friend says, to build the bridge.
By bringing other professionals and experts in our field together, we hope to spark advocacy, joy, and passion for continuing to grow and advance care for our little ones.
Every fourth episode, I join in. I'm Erin Forward, MSP, CCC, SLP, the Yankee by way of Rochester, New York transplant who actually inspired this journey. I bring a different perspective, that of a newish clinician with experience in early intervention, pediatric acute care, and nonprofit pediatric outpatient settings.
So sit back, relax, and watch out for all our squirrels and enjoy this geeky gig brought to you by SpeechTherapyPD.com. Hi, my name is Michelle Linwood Dawson, and these are my financial disclosures. I am the author of Chasing the Swallow, Truth, Science, Hope for Pediatric Feeding and Swallowing Disorders, for which I receive royalties from the sale of. I receive compensation from SpeechTherapyPD.com for CEUs associated with the book, for this podcast, First Bite, as well as for numerous other presentations. I receive compensation from PESI for one course that I have with them. I receive an annual salary from Wolf Speech Therapy Plus LLC, as well as in my capacity as adjunct professor at North Carolina Central University. And I receive profits from the sales of First Bite Boutique sweatshirts and t-shirts that Erin and I design that is not affiliated with First Bite, the podcast, which is sponsored by SpeechTherapyPD.com. My non-financial disclosures. I am topic chair for the Pediatric Feeding and Swallowing Disorders for ASHA for the 2024-2023 convention. I am the chair of the special interest group, or co-chair of the special interest group for pediatric feeding disorders and dysphagia for the Speech Language Hearing Association of Virginia. I am a convention committee member for the Speech Language Hearing Association of Virginia. I am a member of the Speech Language Hearing Association of Virginia. I'm a board of trustee member with the Communication Disorder Foundation of Virginia. I'm a former treasurer with the Council of State Association Presidents, past president of the South Carolina Speech Language Hearing Association. I am a member of ASHA, ASHA SIG 10, ASHA SIG 13, SCISHA, Dysphagia Research Society, National Foundation of Swallowing Disorders, and the National Black Association of Speech, Language, and Hearing.
Okay. My name's Erin Forward, and here are my disclosures. Financial disclosures. I receive a salary from Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center. I am the owner of Forward Education LLC, where I do courses. I receive royalties from Speech Therapy PD for this podcast, First Bite, and other presentations as well. I am also a owner of First Bite Boutique with Michelle Dawson and receive compensation for that, which is also not associated with First Bite podcast, sponsored by Speech Therapy PD. Non-financial disclosures. I am a contributor for the book Chasing the Swallow by Michelle Dawson. I am a member of the South Carolina Coalition for DIR Floor Time. I am a member of ASHA and SIG 13, as well as Dysphagia Outreach Project and Feeding Matters. And I think that's it.
Huzzah! Thanks, y'all. Thanks for sticking around to listen all the way through to the disclosures. Yay!
The views and opinions expressed in today's podcast do not reflect the organizations associated with the speakers and are their views and opinions solely.
Okay, everybody, we are back for part 2 with none other than the Marsha Dunn Klein. And this week I'm excited because Erin was able to finagle her schedule, which is like an act of God, and she could join us. So, yay! And we're back. So, we laid the framework for the 4-part mini series with Marsha in the last episode and talked about like the transitioning landscape of pediatric feeding therapy from the perspective of how is it truly shifting towards neurodiversity affirming evals and interventions. And so today we're going to hone in on that intervention piece and the concept around trying it. I will fully acknowledge that my initial training in PFD, the ultimate goal is for the kid to have a bite, right? Like we had to have a kid have a bite of food. And that's where the behavioral component, the extrinsic motivators come in. And that was a prevailing theory of intervention for pediatric feeding disorders. But as Marsha said last time when she quoted Maya Angelou, and I know Erin's quoted Maya Angelou, when you know better, you do better. And so that's where we are here today. So if you too are from the land of they have to take a bite, it's okay. We can let that go. And Marsha's going to guide us on how to do that. So ladies, thank you for coming.
Well, Michelle and Erin, thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here yet again. You guys are doing such an amazing, uh, making an amazing gift to the field of pediatric feeding
Thank you.
with the variety of people you're interviewing, with your enthusiasm, with the information you're sharing out there. So, from my side here, thank you so much for creating these podcasts. It's a lot of work, I know it, and so thank you, both of you. You know, trying it, it has been kind of a bedrock concept in our field because parents come to us and they're coming to us to help their kids eat more or differently or expand the foods they're eating, right? And so trying it, you're right, Michelle, has been sort of where
Cornerstone.
we want to start. And it's where I've started for years and years. And the goal was, can we help kids find new foods that they like? And for me, I mean, you know me, and my side of this world was I was never going to do something that felt to me like pressure. I was never going to do something that felt like a traditional behavioral approach because I came from the planet of more sort of kinder, gentler, see what works with kids. And I sort of didn't quite understand some of the ways where I, in fact, in my enthusiasm, gentle as it was, kind and sweet as it was, wanting nobody to cry, right? I still was coming from a place of, I want you to try this. I wanted it to be gentle, but I still wanted it. So I was still coming at this from an external motivated way. It's my job to help you find a new food that you like. Now, I still believe it's my job to help kids find new foods, but I want to help them find the ones that work for them. And I want to really look at try it through a new lens. When I think about trying new foods, there are so many layers of influence on whether or not you want to try things. Like, what is it that attracts you guys to trying something new, Erin and Michelle? You know, when you meet something new you want to try, what is it that draws you to that food?
Mm.
The
I will say, I was the kid, my Nana, favorite human in the whole world, always said, you always have to try it. I mean, that was her like, that was what we were always taught. And I think I masked, to be perfectly honest, because I used to say I liked foods that now as an adult, I don't actually like them. Like, I don't actually like nuts, but I would eat nuts because everybody else was eating nuts. I did also get diagnosed with ADHD 4 days ago. So I'm learning about my own neurodiversity. But it's interesting to have the confidence now to say, like, I don't like this, but I was very motivated by the social component of trying a new food, and somebody I loved being open to trying a new food, because we had Sunday dinner every Sunday and my papa would make different foods, and that was like where I think built connection to that. I also really like spicy things, so if it has spice, I'll try it.
It's the visual for me. I love the aesthetics of the meal and how it's plated and served, and watching, if you're at a place where you can watch the chef do it or make it, or that to me is it's the visual experience of it. And then I'm always crestfallen when it's like you bite into it and you're like, oh yeah, that was not as good as it looked. But yeah.
So you both touched on, I mean, a few things. One of the things that influences our trying foods is the people around us that are trying those foods, right? And which is why we've, as a field, for a long time, been saying, and it's appropriate to say, you need. We know that when kids watch people, the grown-ups around them, the people around them that they care about trying things, it is a factor that can influence them towards trying it, right? But also, Michelle, to your point, food is sensory. Food has a look. So I would bet that you and anybody in the audience would have to admit that if you look at a food and it doesn't look good to you, for whatever your personal understanding of good is, you are not going to try it. It doesn't look good, right? I mean, I love all different kinds of foods and sauces, and I have friends that when we go to dinner, their meat needs to be here and their potato needs to be here, and they cannot eat Indian food with me, for example, because their sauces all kind of touch together and they aren't sure what's in the sauce, right? They need to have more identifiable understanding of the food, right? The look, important. But the smell, would you try a food that you hate the smell of it? You wouldn't, because why? Our sensory smell system is meant to protect us. The olfactory system has a protection component. So if you smell fire, you're going to alert to it. If you smell food that's rancid and sour, and you're not going to try it, because your smell system is really, your olfactory system is helping you protect yourself, right? I had a family say to me once, my child hates the smell of banana, and how am I going to get him to eat it? Now think about that sentence. Let's unpack it a little. He hates banana. I can understand that if banana is a common food in that family, the family would go, really, I would love my kid to like banana. But on the other hand, if the starting point is the child hates the smell, my answer was going to be, there are so many foods out there. Could we pick a food when we're teaching about trying? Your child is a little more biased to like it, right? Okay, so smell, look, the texture. We have research that tells us if you like the taste of a food, a certain taste, like say you like strawberries, but if that strawberry comes in your mouth and the sort of furry texture of the outside of the strawberry is uncomfortable to you, the the texture wins over in terms of biasing you against it, right? So if you like the flavor but don't like the texture, you are not going to eat it. So think about how many kiddos we work with that are texture sensitive, right? Think about the sound. If you hate the sound of crunching celery and crunching apples when people around you are eating those, the foods you're going to start learning about liking as we're trying to teach children confidence and competence in trying new foods. We're not going to start with crunchy kind of things that are going to be loud as the bone conduction loudness of chewing it goes towards their ear, which is really close by, right? So sound is important. And then taste, of course. Would you, either of you, eat something you hated the taste of it? No. You check it out. If the taste isn't good for you, you don't continue with it. So we, as people thinking about kids trying foods, need to be very aware of the sensory processing aspects of it. We have to be very aware of experiences. So have you, either of you, had a bad experience with a food that you ate and then made you throw up, or you had the flu? Michelle, you've got one, but if you have a negative experience about something, are you going to try it, or at least you're not going to try it for a long time? Do you have an experience?
Well, no, but I screwed up baking my quiche yesterday. And we were all, well, like, I got sidetracked. I have a pothos that's growing wild in the living room. And so I'd put my quiche in the oven and everything was lovely. And it was baking while I was up on top of an 8-foot ladder, like tying the pothos back up and weaving in these pretty beads. It's beautiful. But I couldn't hop down. So my husband pulled the quiche out of the oven. And when he pulled it out, we let it rest because, you always let your quiche rest. And I went to cut it and it was runny. It
Yeah.
hadn't baked enough. But it was another one of those, like, instantly I had the disgust reflex on my face because I know what my quiche should look like and it didn't look like how it was supposed to look. So then we had to put it back in the oven and then let it bake more. And yeah, but yes.
Pizza Lunchable. Mine's a pizza Lunchable. I had a pizza Lunchable in 3rd grade and I got sick afterwards and I could never eat it ever again and I will never forget it.
We have to learn from those experiences because, first of all, as clinicians trying to support little children's nervous systems, right? We want to create good memories. We want to create positive memories. So kids want to come back to interact with that food. We don't want to create a situation where we have forced somebody to eat it. Now they're gagging and throwing up and they're hating it and they want to run away and then expect them to come back to therapy and learn any more about foods. We have to think about one of our jobs needs to be creating positive memories with foods. So could we go to this disgust thing? Do either of you have a food that's disgusting to you as an adult or has been?
I can't eat meat anymore because I don't have a gallbladder and I have a hemangioma in my liver. So like if I eat meat, it's like a reflex, but like a big GI response. But when I go to make the turkeys for Thanksgiving and Christmas, simply touching the turkey makes me want to vomit. Just it's no. Yes. So raw turkey.
So your reactions of disgusting things have come from they made you not feel well earlier on. The meat did, and then it's turned into a more generalized response, which happens to our
Yes.
kiddos.
Yes.
Absolutely. Erin,
Yes.
do you have one?
I am one of those that like it depends on the day. Like eggs and yogurt are foods where sometimes I really want eggs and sometimes I really don't. And yogurt is one of those where I like will eat yogurt every day for a week and then the next week the looking at it makes me feel uncomfortable.
That's such a perfect example because one of the things that I'm talking about a lot lately is who is this child in front of us in this moment? And when children come to us with neurodiverse differences in their sensory processing, it's who is the child in front of you today? It might be the child in front of you today. Last time in therapy was kind of exploring some kind of a food, but today, oh, I've had a big day at school. I had a meltdown. My system is heightened. I'm just on the edge, right? And those kids. We know those kids when they come to us and they're on the edge. So in this moment, it's not important that we demand a child to do what they did last week. It is important that we're curious about who's in front of us in this moment and how can we adapt and support this child in this moment. And that's exactly who you are with yogurt and egg. It's in the moment. So for me, a disgusting food is steak and kidney pie. My grandmother was Scottish, and when she would come to visit, my mom and my grandmother would make steak and kidney pie because it's the only time my mom ever made it because nobody in the family liked it. So when my grandmother came to visit, we had steak and kidney pie. I could smell it from the bus stop. We had kind of a longish driveway, not so I find it disgusting. The kidneys, it smells like the bottom of a barn to me. The
Oh,
texture
delicious.
of the kidney is disgusting. It's
Wait,
all
is it like an actual kidney? Not like kidney beans, I always thought steak and kidney pie had like kidney beans in it.
no, 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 no. It has kidney. I think it's beef kidney, and it's an organ meat like
Liver.
a liver or yeah. So it has that texture of cooked liver, and it smells like the bottom of a barn. It's pretty for me. My mom and grandmother loved it. Talk about the diversity of reactions to foods, right? But I found it disgusting. So my mom knew enough to cook us hot dogs or something different, right? But I'm saying that because here's the analogy, and I think this is one for the audience to think about. What if you made a goal? because you decided I should like a certain food. And let's just pretend for a minute it's steak and kidney pie. Marsha will eat 3 bites of steak and kidney pie before she eats her dinner, 3 out of 4 times presented, without refusal behaviors, including gagging and retching, so many times in the clinic over the next 3 months, right? And so imagine, Erin, that yours is, I mean, Erin and Michelle, imagine your disgusting foods. That's the goal. Now, this is an extreme goal, I understand. But if that's a goal for me, first of all, who the heck decided steak and kidney pie? So we should be thinking about, when we pick a food that we've decided a child should like, why did we pick that food? Did the child show an interest, and are we guiding them through that? Because we've exposed that child to lots and lots of different food interactions in our therapy, and they were fun, and they showed an interest? Or did we just decide they should like that banana, or they should like that steak and kidney pie, right? Number one. Number two, how dare you make me taste that disgusting food 3 out of 4 times? So does that mean, no, I'm not going to eat it at all? So does that mean if I'm not going to eat it in order to achieve this goal, are you putting it in my mouth? Because I'm not. And then 3 out of 4 times, I told you the first time I don't like steak and kidney pie. You're going to make me do it 3 times, and you're going to make me do that before I get my actual dinner? Everybody else has the privilege of coming to a mealtime and getting full, being able to come to a mealtime and eat enough to fuel you up, right? To fill you up. And you want me to have 3 bites, not 1, not 2, 3 of steak and kidney pies before I even get my dinner? And then, what do you mean without refusal behaviors? For me, refusing the steak and kidney pie is the right answer. Thank you anyway, because I actually know, if you, since I'm not going to eat it, you'd have to put it in my mouth, and then I would probably gag or vomit. It's not like I want to gag and vomit. It's like that's just what would be my body's reaction. But then you're judging me and forcing me, even though my body's having a reaction that's the right reaction for my body. That's a protective reaction. And so now you're not even letting me have my normal reaction. My reaction is that I hate it, right? And then, wait, I have to do it 4 to 5 days a week, or in the clinic. Why in the clinic? Who cares about the clinic? It should be at the home with the parent that's comfortable, right? And so can you see that when you took this extreme example to its end goal, or its end thinking about a point, we have to be careful. Because for some kiddos, that banana that we're forcing them to eat, that they hate the smell of, could easily be steak and kidney pie, that disgust food. You guys will appreciate, I just was in Berlin a month and a half ago, and I went to the Disgusting Foods Museum. They have a whole museum of disgusting foods. It was amazing.
That's amazing.
But it reminds me that disgust is a very important sensory response that has a place to keep us safe. And when your nervous system is wired differently, and you have a very big reaction to a food that's not actually unsafe, like that neurodiverse reaction to the banana, right? I mean, bananas aren't actually unsafe, but if your body is saying to you, wait, alert, alert, I'm unsafe, oh my goodness, right? The proper response is to protect yourself against it. So do we see kiddos in therapy that run away from the room when they smell the room, or whatever food the parent brought out or that we brought out, that push it away, that cry and melt down and become dysregulated? That response is that child saying, but I need to protect myself because it's not right for me today in this moment. And so the thing that we have to be very aware of is that we are all unique. We all have very unique neurodivergent ways of responding to the foods in our life. And so if you can humor me with one more story, because I just love stories. A little girl came to see me that was, and I don't think I told you this before, so if I have, you can remind me, Michelle, but she came to therapy for an intensive 4-day interaction. She had a tube, and she came from out of state to come to where my clinic was. And so we sort of, live and breathe eating with that family for 3 or 4 days. And one of the things we do is we talk about with the parents about what foods do you like, and we order food out so that we all can have some meals together, because one of the parts of feeding therapy that I think is important is that the child gets to see the grown-ups eating. The child is eating, we're all eating together, and so the parents were foodies, and really we had Italian food one day and Indian food one day and Mexican food one day, and we just had all these interesting foods, and we invited my little friend to the table, and part of that was evaluative, like how does she respond, is this good or bad. Now, let's go back a second. Before she came to see us from another state, she'd been working in therapy on trying to learn. The decisions were made that she should learn how to eat apple sauce. So applesauce. So, and think about us, all the clinic foods we have: applesauce, yogurt, veggie sticks, all the things we have in our clinic. But so applesauce was the decision. For a year, the parents told us she'd been working on towards applesauce, and they started with a dry spoon in her mouth, and then a wet spoon in her mouth, and
Oh,
then
good Lord.
apple juice that was diluted with water, and then more apple juice flavor, and then more, until she was finally able to take a quarter of a teaspoon of apple juice from this. So she'd been working for a year. And so the parents, were trying to be patient and understand. And they said, the therapist didn't want to push her because she was, it didn't want to make her feel unsafe, and so there was confusion all around and questioning. And one of these days, when we were eating Indian food for lunch, we had naan, and the parents and we were dipping it and offering it to each other. And she dipped a piece of naan in some Indian sauce, maybe some kind of curry, and her eyes were wide open, and she loved it. And it was the first food she ate. The moral of this story is that we, unfortunately, can be the limiting factor by coming up with some grown-up idea of what foods the child should try, when really in our therapy these days, Erin and Michelle, our therapy has a lot to do with, we're cooking, we're making blender things, we're making fruit kebabs to send home, we're making salads, we're doing pancakes, we're doing all this food. But why? So that for the kids where it works, and there are qualifiers here, but we are seeing, what do you like touching and being around, but we're not saying we're going to make pancakes so you can eat it. You're going to make a fruit salad because you must eat it, because that's the thing that's different. It's not so you can eat it. It's so that you can increase your overall comfort and confidence interacting with food textures. And our experiences in the middle of interacting with foods, we're going to see kids licking on their finger and trying things in a different way. And that's the direction we're going to go. So we're saying, could you make the salad to take home for your family for dinner? Can you make these shish kebabs for your family? And so kids feel appreciated around meal times because they're making something for the family,
Yes.
as opposed to, I'm going to go to the table, they're going to give me steak and kidney pie, I'm not going to be able to eat it, and I'm going to disappoint my grown-ups, and it's going to be a meltdown. But instead, now they have a food interaction where I'm going to help make fruit kebabs, or pancakes, or whatever it is, for my siblings, or for the people in the clinic, or for somebody else. So the pressure is not directly on the child, that they know at the end of, like, why would they want to interact with food at all if they think we're going to require them to eat it at the end? So trying it has to be nuanced. Trying it has to be careful. And a lot of it comes from our watching, who is this child in this moment.
Yes.
That was a long conversation. Sorry.
No, that was
Well, it would
beautiful.
also, the only other thing I was going to say too, from a try it standpoint to the speech pathologist out there, is especially if you're working with a child who's non-speaking or partially speaking, how many of these kids only have 5 foods on their device? And you don't give them opportunity to even access the language to say other foods they might like, because that's the only thing they see. I worked with a child that, it was like goldfish, applesauce, chicken nuggets, and french fries. And then we added these other foods on her device that she had been exposed to. And all of a sudden she was asking for these new foods because nobody had ever given her the opportunity to communicate her curiosity of what she was interested in. Like, it's all encompassing of the way that we provide those offers and those opportunities. And we have to give them as many ways to express that interest so we know which foods to try with them.
And that's predicated on the fact that they have access to the AAC device in the first place. Because for a lot of kids, especially in more rural areas, or with clinicians that don't have access to the tech, if we can't even get a speech generating device in the door, it's so many iterations backwards. We have one little guy that I just started working with. He wants to talk about the colors of foods. And I got him. He has no device. He's a Gestalt language processor, level 2. I've learned from Erin and from Farwell what all this means. I'm growing, but Bubby has no device. And so I'm like, well, how do we feel about this? So I have the clinic device while we're in the queue to get his trial device sent over. And his favorite thing in the world is tan popcorn. Tan popcorn is the Smart Foods in the black bag, but it has the label has like tan on it. And so he wants to ask for tan popcorn, but nobody could understand what he was saying until, it took a lot to get there. But when you were talking earlier about the disgust reflex, and it triggered something that popped up on my cell phone this morning. There's a brand, and I texted the link to both of y'all. There's a brand new podcast on bowel sounds, which is the NASAFGAN, the National Association. It's the GI Association of North America.
NASPGAN.
Yes. They have a new episode this morning out on GI disorders and autistic children with Dr. Kara Margolis. And I can't wait to hear it. So, I haven't listened to it because it literally popped up this morning. But that to me is a struggle that I fight daily, is the local physicians that I have encountered back in South Carolina, here in Virginia. If a child doesn't want to try the food, especially if they are autistic, it's a behavior. It's their choice. And trying to get them to partner in on their refusals could be a safety measure. They are so in tuned with themselves that they know this doesn't feel right. And then when you finally get the door opened, we find out that there's EOE, or there's severe inflammation like chronic esophagitis, or there's constipation, or or celiac disease. But are we taking the time to listen to what that kid's telling us with their refusals so that we can support them getting medically stable?
Yes, absolute yes. So first of all, I don't think of the kids we work with as having behavior problems. I think of them as communicating something. So instead of saying this child is not doing what I as the grown-up want them to do, I want to turn that around and say, what is this child communicating? Is it that they have a history of not feeling well, or that it doesn't look good to them, their sensory system, or they've had a negative experience with it, or they don't want to ever try anything new because every mealtime experience they've had has been too pressury? There's lots of reasons, right? But also starting with how did you feel? So can we be curious about what's going on right now? And can we acknowledge that this is your reaction? You're not liking that smell of the banana. Something's wrong with that banana today, right? Acknowledge it, and also support them. So what do we need to do with this banana today, right? So then it's helping the person understand what to do about it. For example, 13-year-old child has ARFID and learning to make a Nutella sandwich. Did I describe this to you last time?
Yes,
Okay.
you did. But
So let me just summarize it for a second, though. This is we said to him, you could learn how to make that Nutella sandwich, because sometimes mom wasn't available to make it when he just needed it and he had very few foods, right? So he went, we met, and we're going to make Nutella sandwiches. And so you can learn a lot about kids by interacting with food with them, right? He knows that never will we make him do something that's uncomfortable to his system. Always we will validate what's going on with him, right? And then come up with a new strategy that he can help advocate for himself. So we we got out the bread, the peanut butter, or the Nutella, and the knives and forks and everything that we needed to make it. And he went to open the bread, stuck his hand in the bread, and realized, I can't touch this. That was very important information. How are you going to make a Nutella sandwich if you can't even reach into the bread bag? So the story here that we talked about last time, but I'm going to summarize here, is that we said to him, oh, something about that bread. You don't want to stick your finger in there. Nope, I don't want to. Okay, well, if you're going to make a sandwich, you somehow have to get the bread out. Could there be another way that this could work for you? So first of all, we're not judging him that he can't do that. We're acknowledging him and saying, okay, but then include him in the conversation. So, what do you think we have to do to get the bread out? You could dump it. You could reach for it with tongs, but we also had gloves in our little handy dandy kit right there. You want to, you could wear gloves. And I put gloves on and I said, if I reached in with gloves, I wouldn't have to touch the bread directly. That could be a way to do it. He decided to use gloves. So we acknowledged and validate who he was, what his story was, and then what would be a solution that he could partner with in coming up with a solution. And so for 3 weeks, he reached in with his gloves and he pulled out the bread and he made his sandwiches. He was independent, right? We didn't not do the activity because he didn't like feeling the bread. We adapted because he lives in a world where food happens, even though you have a different way of processing it. And 3 weeks into it, he forgot to put his gloves on and he reached in and got his bread and realized he was okay at his pace. That's a way that we can adapt for somebody's individuality. I wanted to say something earlier though, but because we all really believe that if you only give somebody the 5 foods they know about, on the one hand, you're being kind to them. You're not making them stressed, right? You don't want to stress kids. But on the other hand, they will never meet a new food. And so you will never know that you might find another food that you like if you've never met it. So the way we talk about it in our clinic is when you meet a new food that you want to try, could there be some ways, how can we help you approach that food, right? Because there's so many different ways of approaching try it. So for example, I see lots of kiddos where the parent of the little 1-year-old or 2-year-old or 8-year-old just says try it, and the parent's trying to put it in the child's mouth, right? And you often see those spoonfuls that are mountains of food on that spoon, and the parent's trying to put it in the child's mouth. The parent just wants them to like the new food. They're not being bad parents. They just want them to like it. Or it's a food that, if I like yogurt, Erin, and I'm giving you a mouthful, it's because I just think I like yogurt. Everybody should like yogurt. I'm going to put this in your mouth, right? But imagine somebody putting that yogurt in your mouth on a wrong day, just like I imagine somebody putting the steak and kidney pie in my mouth. So first of all, the rule needs to be, I'm in charge of what goes in my own mouth. Don't you ever put it in my mouth. Let me be the one. That's number one, right? But so number two, there are lots of kiddos that we work with that have inadvertently thought that trying it is what's going to please the grown-ups. So my little friend with the Nutella sandwiches said to his mom one day, okay, I want to try pizza. And he genuinely did want to please his parents and all the people around make pizza. So he wanted to like pizza. But the pizza came and he just opened the lid of the pizza box and started to sob. It didn't work for him. So he was trying to go forward with, I think people want me to try this, but also trying to sort of understand his sensory system, which interpreted pizza that day as pretty disgusting, right? Then another way people try it, I see older humans. And so this is an example of a 40-year woman with ARFID who met this lovely man and got married at 40. And she said to me, she worked with my husband, and so I saw her at a community kind of event. She said, Marsha, I need to learn to like new foods. Did I tell you this story before, Michelle? This is a great story. She said, I need to learn to like some new foods. I said, really? And she said, yeah, I married a foodie and I only like white potatoes and French fries and white mashed potatoes and white rice and white bread. And she was pretty much the white diet. And that's what had worked for her. She was 40. She took a vitamin and that's what worked for her. But she wanted to share more enjoyment of foods with this brand new husband. And so, oh my goodness, that's a big story. So I said, okay, how do you try foods? And she said to me, okay, so I put some on the fork, and she's got, like in this pantomime she's showing me. I put it on the fork, then I put the fork in my mouth, then I plugged my nose, then I chugged out some water, and then I swallow it that way. And I said to her, yes. So Michelle's covering her mouth in awe, right? Oh, I said, sweetheart, how's that working for you? Right? And she goes, well, it's not. I'm never finding new foods I like. And see, your reaction was, of course, that's not gonna work. Because we think about this every day. But she is a perfectly normal human being. She's a bright person. She works in my husband's office. She's a bright human, and she thinks that's how you try a new food because we're confused as a society about how to try new foods. And so then that was one of those days that I thought, oh my gosh, I just need to teach about trying new foods because that's not the way to do it. So I said to her, okay, what food would you like to try? Now, this is important to me because it needs to come from the human that's in front of me.
Yes.
I've got to see what they want to try. She said, I want to like salmon. And I'm thinking, okay, that's really a big smell, but okay. And so I said, so, all right, who cooks salmon in your house? She said, well, my husband does. He grills it outside. Okay. And how does that work for you? Can you be around him when he's cooking the salmon? What do you think of the smell? And why would I ask that? Because if you don't like the smell of banana, you're not going to eat a banana. If you don't like the smell of salmon, you're not going to eat a salmon, right? So I need to know that distant sense, smell is taste from a distance. And so I need to know that if she can is the smell okay? She said, yeah, I don't mind the smell at all. Great. So what food might you be eating with that salmon? She said, well, bread, potatoes, rice, some white thing. I said, okay, could you take a piece of bread, whatever size you want, and put the tiniest little morsel of salmon on it, and then put some bread on top of it and make it a little sandwich with the tiniest little flavor of salmon in there? And her eyes got wide and she said, I could do that. And I said to her, the reason you do that is because the bread, which is familiar to your mouth, could dilute the worry about this new trying. It's not going to bombard you and flood you with a big mouthful of salmon. It's going to soften it. So it's going to dilute the texture. It's going to dilute the look, the smell, and the taste. She said, I could do that. And then I said, so if a little tiny amount is okay, if it's just okay, you could do it again as many times as you wanted. Or if it was okay enough, you could make the piece a little bigger and a little bigger and a little bigger until at some point you get a bread with a little piece of salmon on top. So the salmon's touching your mouth a little more. If that's okay, at some point you might just feel like putting a piece of salmon in your mouth, right? So that was this random off the cuff consultation at an office party, right? And so 2 weeks later, I happened to see her again because adults aren't who I work with on a daily basis, right? It was kids, right? So 2 weeks later, I saw her and she said, Marsha, I have found 8 new foods that I can eat.
Amazing.
The difference was we gave her a strategy that was not flooding, which is why I think one of our roles as feeding therapists is to provide children with strategies. So I will regularly say, so when I meet a new food that I'm thinking about trying, and this is me, not putting it on them. When I meet a new food, one of the things I do is I smell it. Because if I like the smell, I'm thinking I might want to try it. But if I hate the smell, I'll put that away for now and think about that another time, right? Because, and I tell them, smell is taste from a distance. So when you smell a food, you get kind of an idea what it might taste like. And then sometimes I just want to bring it near my lips because my lips give me an idea what it might feel like in my mouth, or I could feel it in my hand. I need to kind of get an idea what's the texture of that food like. And if you put it right into your mouth, that's a big experience because it's in that little mouth personal space, right? But your lips can be a way to give you a little more information before it's all the way in your mouth. And sometimes I just stick my tongue out and give it a little lick. because then again, I have the flavor. Remember, flavor is important, but also texture can bomb the activity. So I want to give the flavor first before it's a big pile of it in your mouth. Right. And then, if I'm going to try something new that I'm not sure about, I might try the tiniest little bite with my teeth. And if I don't like it, I can spit it out, no problem. But if I do like the tiniest amount, if I like it well enough, I could make bigger and bigger tastes over time. But you know what? I go with at how fast I'm ready. So you need to try it in a way that's comfortable with you at your own pace. And so I have on my website, on the Get Permission Institute website, I have a couple things. I have the grasshopper story on there. Many of you know the grasshopper story about trying grasshoppers. But I also have some videotapes from Brady. And Brady's a little guy that sort of demonstrated how we can show kids how to try new foods. And so I'll say to kiddos, let's practice how you could try a new food. I am not going to teach somebody to try a new food on a Brussels sprout or some steak and kidney pie. I'm going to teach kids how you could try a new food when you meet one you want to try on a food they like already. You could teach somebody how to try a goldfish if they like goldfish, or a chicken nugget if they like that, or a waffle, or whatever one of their foods is. So I teach it, okay, so you could smell it and see what you think, and we practice that together. You could rub it on your finger and just bring your finger near your lips or your tongue and see what your lips and tongue think about it, the flavor. You could just bring it to your lips and kind of feel it and see if that feel is okay. You could try the tiniest little tiny bite, a little mouse bite. And those of you who know me and have taken my courses know we have a mouse bite chart, right? That make it bigger and bigger from mouse to elephant, right? And then, if you don't like it, it's okay. You could spit it out because that means that your tongue isn't quite ready for it that day. No judgment, that spitting out is okay. And then you can go at your own pace. And so part of our feeding therapy with trying it is giving kids the opportunity, not the exposure, the opportunity to be around a lot of different foods and find where their comfort level is in all these sensory and experiential areas. Part of it is helping them figure out when you meet something you want to try, how you could go about trying it. And so that feels like a kinder, gentler way to go forward. And I think I've mentioned before that we have in our clinic what we call trust truths. So we want our kiddos to trust us. So the rules are, I will never make you put something in your mouth that you don't want to. You are in charge of what goes in your own mouth. And not everybody has to like everything. And you are your own unique self. And also, some days are different. Some days you might kind of want to try that yogurt, Erin, and other days you might not. But we want to teach kids to be interoceptively aware of how is that food having a reaction in their own body. And for those of you who haven't met Kelly Mahler yet, please check out Kelly Mahler and all the amazing work she's doing on interoception. I just need to get a plug in for her. So go ahead.
Okay. One, when you're talking about the bread and the salmon, you need to come to Stanton and go to the depot because they have the best garlic bread salmon sandwich I've ever had in my entire life. And as you were describing that vignette, all I could think was my husband and I need a date because we need to go to the depot to get that. And two, getting caregiver buy-in on spitting. I have found with some caregivers, I have one lovely gentleman that I work with, and he's former military. And so when his son has the teeniest, tiniest little bite and he wants to spit it out, the dad you can see his whole body stiffening in a reaction to his son wanting to spit it out. And I'm like, no, it's okay. He's got to learn this. But trying to navigate that psychosocial piece with the caregiver, that it's safe if the child wants to spit it out because they don't feel safe. And the dad wanting the child to be respectful of societal norms that we don't spit in public. It's been an interesting, really dug in deep to caregiver coaching and to empower the caregiver that this is okay.
Well, so the thing that I do two things. One is I talk about, hey, at some point, is there a food that disgusts you? And I will go back to that disgust food on a regular basis because there's going to be one food that disgusts this dad. So imagine that I want you to eat that food because I think making it personal can be a way to help change people's aha moments. So that's number one. And number two, when we teach about spitting out, like, oh, I get it. Spitting out in public, I can see your reaction. Boy, that's a big reaction. But you know what? We don't want to teach kids to just open their mouth and let it dribble down their chin under their shirt and in a restaurant. That can be embarrassing for a parent, right? But so we can say, so let's practice spitting out in a napkin in the most polite way, but let's practice that with a goldfish or a piece
Yes.
of cracker or something the child likes, so that Dad, when your child needs to spit out that food that's just not working for him today, we need to say, okay, if you need to spit it out, go for it. And we want you to do it in a polite way. And if somebody's giving you a food you don't want, you can say, no, thank you. You don't have to scream and push it off the table and tip over the table and disrupt the whole meal. You could say, wait, no thanks. And you can know when you say no, thank you, that your grown-ups will listen.
And
They
support
will
you.
and support you. And that's the thing that people with sensory processing differences need to know, that they're wonderful the way they are. They happen to have differently wired systems, and they're great humans, and they happen to not like that steak and kidney pie or that yogurt or that egg that's too runny, right? And so we have to acknowledge that they are responding to their own nervous system, and then teach them, oh, and sometimes it got in your mouth accidentally, and oh my goodness, that quiche was too runny, and oh, I need to spit it out. But then what's the polite way to do it? So we have to not only meet children where they are, but and this is what you're describing, Michelle. We have to be curious about those parents and where they are and how to help them
Yes.
get on board. Because in my experience, we have to have empathy for the child, be curious about who they are right now, what's going on. We have to have empathy for the parent, what's going on for them right
Yes.
now. But also, one of our biggest challenges, as you've described this, Michelle, over and over again, is helping the parent have empathy for their own child and get it. Because the parents that have that reaction of, oh, this is so hard for my kiddo, that reaction gets more change than the I will make you do it, and I'm going to be angry, and I'm going to force you, right? But the parents that go, oh, this is hard for my kiddo, that is brilliant, and you can build on that. And I think that's a really hard thing for us to figure out, how to meet that particular parent's need in this particular situation. It's complicated.
Erin, this is where I think of your floor time experience, because it's all about the relationship building and what you're pulling in.
Well, and you're building that. And I've learned a lot from Kim Barthel, who I love so much. And she talks so much about that attachment piece. Like by helping that caregiver understand how that child is feeling, you're building attachment for them to better understand their child, for them to better have the language. And we know language is so powerful, which is why the language we use. And I love like following this shift and like how you're describing things too, because it matters what we call things and how we say it, because it directly affects the way a caregiver views their child, the way a child views themselves, the way a child views their differences. And I say oftentimes in my therapy too, like a lot of our job is to understand what's happening, and it shouldn't be right away to be, let's progress. The first thing we should be doing is, let's understand what's going on at mealtime. Let me help you understand your child. Let me help your child understand what's going on. And sometimes even just that can completely change mealtime as a whole for that family, because it's less of a, I need to fix everything, and more of a, let's help you better advocate for what your child needs and your child better advocate for what they need, and help both of them feel safe too.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the things we're going to talk about at our next part of the series is really how to nourish children, not only with food, but with that connection and that relationship and trusting their grown-ups. And as therapists, I think some of us have had experiences where, we do magical things in therapy and we think, oh, pat ourselves on the shoulder. This kid ate this today, right? I mean, we are people that want to help. And when kids try new food, we are excited. We're human, right? And then those kids haven't eaten that stuff at home. And what we have to realize is We need to get better at understanding the environment that child is eating in at home. What is the environment that child is going to take the skills that they learn in therapy and eat those foods or other foods at home? And some of us have the privilege and the benefit of seeing kids in their own homes, which I think is amazing when it comes to eating. But some people don't, and so what we do in the clinic has we've got to have carryover into what does the mealtime look like at home, and what happens if your child doesn't want it at home, and then what do you say, and then what do they say, and then how did that go, and really look at the environment at home as, is it a safe place for that child to try new foods? Because safety is a lot about how you feel, and that's a sensory reaction. Are you feeling safe, regulated, connected? And do you like the sensory aspects of these foods? And are we building positive experiences? And that's all, sensory impacts on all of that.
So I just picked up a little one on my caseload that he's not so little, and dual diagnosis of Down syndrome and ASD, also celiac disease and some other issues, right? But what changed for this kid was the caregiver advocated because she saw his continual anxiety in all settings. And I mean extreme anxiety. And she advocated for the child, and they started a low dose of Zoloft. This kid, who was self-imposed, incredibly restricted with his diet, became curious, and his stomach became calm. I got him after he'd gone to really progressive GI consults, and they determined that it was truly his emesis and severe loose stools were anxiety driven. And normally, there's the constipation factor for children that have Down syndrome because we don't have the tone to get a solid, strong bowel movement. But he was having the antithesis of this. But I came into the picture right at this moment where we were actually getting medicinal intervention. And the first session, we were not on any meds. The orders were in, the prescription just hadn't been picked up. And he had had feeding therapy from a therapist before me, from a speech therapist and an OT and a couple of, I was like umpteenth iteration in. And for this child, it was the tool and the assistance that he needed to feel successful in life and various settings, and in going into public, to engage in the grocery store, to just and not eat in all of the settings, to just simply be present in those settings without having panic attacks from social anxiety. But his food, every week, it's a new food he wants to try. He tells us what he wants to try, and then he carries it home and eats it at home. And honestly, in all of my years of doing feeding therapy, I've never had a child go on a medicine for their anxiety. So this is new for me to witness. And now I'm kind of curious because I have another little friend who I talked to the mom last week, and I was like, do you guys have anxiety disorders in your family? And she goes, mine's debilitating and I'm on a large amount of medicine. And I'm like, okay, so PFD versus ARFID. I don't have an ARFID diagnosis. I have a PFD diagnosis. This is a different case. I've inherited one. We need to get over to UVA because they've got some really good supports over there. But two, we need to have a crucial conversation with your pediatrician. And she messaged me a couple of days later to say she got the appointment scheduled with the pediatrician because it was also impacting him for that second child in school settings and after school clubs. And it's not just, this is new uncharted territory for me professionally. Just kind of interesting.
I mean, there are pockets around the country that are really looking at anxiety medication for some of these kiddos. And I mean, I guess what I have to say is it depends on every single person's situation. Absolutely.
Yes.
But the thing we do know is that when you are anxious, stressed, worried, it messes with your GI system. It can suppress your hunger. It can make everything else more heightened. Change can be more worrisome, changing the environment. So when you're starting out sort of dysregulated, you're starting out with in not a readiness place to learn, you're not going to benefit from feeding therapy. And I've also had the experience where kiddos that ended up on some sort of medication that dampened their overall heightened trigger response to things, that paired with really good supportive therapy that also acknowledged, went slowly, went at the child's pace, gave the child autonomy, and was aware of all the other things we've been talking about, paired together, that was kind of a magical situation for some of the a little bit older kiddos that I've worked with. But the important thing for us all to know is when your system is not working well for you, and Kelly Mahler will also talk about this in the interoceptive work that she's doing. But when you're feeling stressed and anxious all the time, that has an impact on your gut, which has an impact on your eating, has an impact on your gagging. That's much more of a trigger gag. I mean, when all of that can be calmed down, one way to do it is to rearrange how we are, how kids trust us, and the pressure and the stress that's in the eating environment. And for some kiddos, there's so much of that anxiousness going on that some kiddos also need another layer of medical support and worth having conversations about. So yeah.
It's just I don't know, I felt so super green, and I love learning. So to grow with this family, because the mom was like, "Have you ever seen anything like this before?" I was like, "Nope." I was like, "I honestly no." I was like, "This is for the first time." I was like, "We're figuring this out together." But to have a mutual trust with this caregiver that I am going to support, this plan in place by the child psychiatrist, by pediatrician, by GI, like everybody, and I am happy to create the safe space. And mom brought in gluten-free chocolate caramel brownies last week that were divine. And he opened his lunchbox from this is the food he picked out of a variety of foods, and then proceeded to touch it and give us all bites. I mean, it was just like, what is happening? Like, who are you today? And it was a
And
big win.
feeding, I feel like it too is such information. I mean, I myself, when I'm more anxious, crave like bread and cheese. And like I will make myself a grilled cheese sandwich when I'm more anxious because that's what my gut can digest. But I had a mom the other day say to me, we're working on feeding and communication. He's autistic, and I asked how feeding was going this week because we problem solve, and she said, he's going towards more of his safe foods this week. He hasn't had as much interest in trying things, but I'm seeing so much growth in other areas. And so I think his capacity this week to try new foods is not there as much because he's focused on other things, or I'm noticing a little anxiety in this area. And it was just so beautiful to have that caregiver acknowledge that and to have the understanding of her child so that she didn't look at that as a regression. She looked at it as just information about what was happening, and also acknowledging that our kids are developing in so many areas and we can't expect to see growth all at the same time in every area. We can't do that as humans. But the more that caregiver understands about their child and what foods they like and how they like to try foods, the better they can sit there and their anxiety can decrease, because it's like, no, I'm noticing all these other things, and it's okay that he didn't try a new food this week, or he didn't show as much interest because look at all these other things he's doing.
Yes, absolutely yes. And in the big picture of our therapy, if a child tried, lettuce this week, okay, that's okay. But if the child learned how to try a new food, if the child learned how to say, hey, no thanks, if the child learned this isn't the right moment for me and I don't want to do it and it's okay because my grown-ups understand, that is a gift. And I'm spending a lot more time these days listening to adults who have lived experiences, neurodiverse adults who probably mostly have autistic ARFID kinds of diagnoses. And if you go to the Get Permission Institute, we have a new section called Voices of Lived Experiences, and we have 2 interviews up right now, and we're building on those. But they're both adults who have ARFID and limited experiences with eating. And one of the people I meet adults who say, I'm eating probably close to the same foods I ate when I was 8. But I've added some few foods, and periodically I add a new food, and I'm so excited when I add it. But what I want to say about some of the adults that I know is that being exciting new food triers is not who they're going to end up being. They're not going to, in their way, may well not be people that are going to be just like adventuresome eaters. We all have different temperaments and different baselines. If that person can learn that they're an amazing human anyway, if that person can learn when I meet a new food I want to try, how can I not overwhelm myself? If that person can learn how to adapt, like I'm going out to eat with friends, but I'd rather eat first and just have a conversation with them rather than eat in that situation. Or I want to be able to advocate with my friends and say, hey, I really like to go to this place because I love their cheese pizza. If that person has learned to navigate the world that around them within their eating challenges, those are gifts. If they learn today's the day I just really need grilled cheese sandwich because I'm having a stressful day, and they can love themselves through that and not feel somehow guilty that they didn't try something new, that's a gift, right? So we get a little bit motivated about trying new. But for a lot of our kiddos, learning how to navigate their body is the biggest deal for them as they live in this world where people eat things they don't necessarily eat.
We had a friend in high school whose mom was a teacher and brought home a lunch tray because he didn't like his foods to touch. I mean, the kid got into like MIT or some crazy school full ride, and we just all knew that was his MO. But last year, when I did onboarding up at JMU, they gave everybody for a back to the school year kickoff bento boxes. And all I could think is, I bet this guy has a really cool collection of bento boxes now, because as an adult, if you don't want your foods, or as a kid, if you don't want your foods to touch, bento boxes are cool. And I don't know, it makes me think of that in universal access. Everybody, it's become streamlined, or mainstream is the word I'm looking for, to have these tools, and they're useful and purposeful, and it's okay. So
You know, I know we're probably going over, but I used to say to people, to parents, when you send your lunch to your kids' lunch at school, and they only like a few things, send the things that they like, and then put something else in there, like a green pepper or a carrot or something. And you know what? I don't say that anymore. I have to admit, for most kids, because what I've learned from talking to people with lived experience is when you're stressed about meal times and school lunches are out there and the cafeteria is out there, and we all know it's a crazy place, right? It's just a wild and crazy place. Just getting some nourishment in your body during that 20 minutes you're allotted to eat is very likely more important. So I found kiddos that wouldn't eat even the things they knew because there was this random carrot put in there or a green pepper or something. And so I don't knee jerk make that recommendation like I used to, because we look at finding new foods and trying new foods in environments that feel really safe and calm and regulated. And for many kiddos, that school lunchroom isn't the place, right? And sometimes I say, if he really wants to just drink his lunch, is that the worst thing? He's getting some nourishment so he can get on with his school day, and then maybe his new food trying experiences could be in a safer place at home or in clinic.
Goose told me not to add as much Japanese barbecue sauce to his tomato cucumber salad. And I was like, baby, that's your favorite thing when I make it at home. And he goes, yeah, but I don't think I'm allowed to go up and pour out the juice in the big trash can. So I've been having to drink it, and it's really spicy. And I was like, oh, dear almighty, buddy, if there's extra juice in there, yes, you can absolutely go pour the extra juice out. You don't have to drink that. But he needs to be taught social rules around different environments, and this is an acceptable social rule for. He's so pretty. Yes, he's my baby. Okay, on that awkward turtle note, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for coming back and doing this with us again. We so look forward to your time and expertise and lifting our community up. It's appreciated. So
Thank you for having me and our far-reaching conversations that touch lots of different topics. So hopefully some of the stories we told will hit home for some of the people in your audience. And these are conversations we are all having and growing with and tiptoeing with change here and there as we can manage it. So just like our kiddos are trying to not overwhelm themselves with trying new foods, we want to not overwhelm ourselves with a lot of the newer or interesting different ways of approaching feeding therapy. But when we know more, when we know better, we do better. So thank you, Maya.
Yes. Yes. Okay. All right. Well, everybody, check it out at Get Permission Institute on Instagram and First Bite Podcast on Instagram. And everybody, thank you for joining us again.
Thank you for joining us for today's course. To complete the course, you must log into your account and complete the quiz and the survey. If you have indicated that you are part of the ASHA registry and entered both your ASHA number and a complete mailing address in your account profile prior to course completion, we will submit earned CEUs to ASHA. Please allow 1 to 2 months from the completion date for your CEUs to reflect on your ASHA transcript. Please note that if this information is missing, we cannot submit to ASHA on your behalf. Thanks again for joining us. We hope to see you next time.
Feeding Matters guides system-wide changes by uniting caregivers, professionals, and community partners under the Pediatric Feeding Disorder Alliance. So what is this alliance? The Alliance is an open access collaborative community focused on achieving strategic goals within 3 focus areas: education, advocacy, and research. So who is the Alliance? It's you. The Alliance is open to any person passionate about improving care for children with a pediatric feeding disorder. To date, 187 professionals, caregivers, and partners have joined the Alliance. You can join today by visiting the Feeding Matters website at www.feedingmatters.org. Click on PFD Alliance tab and sign up today. Change is possible when we work together. That's a wrap, folks. Once again, thank you for listening to First Bite, fed, fun, and functional. I'm your humble but yet sassy host, Michelle Dawson, the All Things Peds SLP. This podcast is part of a course offered for continuing education through speechtherapypd.com. Please check out the website if you'd like to learn more about CEU opportunities for this episode, as well as the ones that are archived. And as always, remember, feed your mind, feed your soul, be kind, and feed those babies.